All right, moving forward, we have the SEC on tap. Number one, Georgia. How often have we talked about Georgia on this podcast? Like, not at all.
They haven't played anybody, Brett.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Georgia, a 14.5-point favorite against Florida with an over-under of 47 points. This game kicks off at 3:30 p.m. Eastern on CBS. It is the world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I think they've moved away from that branding, but I'm here to say no. The fans have not moved away from that branding.
Me too.
It's a great. It's a neutral cider. I know the fans like that. It's a great rivalry. It has not been a close rivalry as of late, though. The favorite has covered in 7 of the last 8, and 8 of the last 9 games were decided by double digits with a 20.2 average margin of victory. So we're talking about, they don't like each other, and then one team beats the crap out of the other one. Typically how this game has gone recently. Brock Bowers, of course, is out with the ankle sprain. And the backfield is actually banged up for Georgia this year. This was crazy. I love this. Bowers nearly doubled up the yards after catch of the second place tight end in the country. And of all the other tight ends that are outside the top 4 in YAC, he at least doubled them up. So he has 400 yards of YAC on the season. He's not playing for the rest of the year, but it's going to take... I'll be honest, I don't know if anybody else can catch him. We're through 8 weeks, and he's still doubled up the second place almost. So he might still finish the king of YAC even without playing the back half of the season here. 3 starters for Florida are questionable. This team's been banged up all season long. I've said it a couple times. I don't know if they're over-reporting their injuries. I don't know if they're being proactive and transparent more so than anybody else. This is a hurt team, and most notably Eugene Wilson, a receiver who is a big contributor, even though Ricky Pearsall is kind of the guy there. And then starting center, Kingsley, I always try for last names. I'm not trying this one. Their starting center is also questionable for this game. He's missed a lot of time this year. Georgia on the other side, they're 1-5-1 against the spread this season. They're failing to cover by over 5 points per contest. I have shout out Brad Powers for collecting and sharing that stat. He's the one that put that out there on Twitter. Not great. And I think that does, a lot of people say they're against the spread margin. Doesn't really matter. And I agree in most senses, especially if you're looking at a team that's 500 or just a game or two over. But when you're talking about 1-5-1, that means that the market's expectations for Georgia are much above what they're currently at. And I think it's starting to catch up a little bit, but they're not covering, which means that the odds makers are simply just overshooting Georgia's potential here. And I do think that matters a little bit. I know quarterback Carson Beck hasn't been the most exciting quarterback in the country, but honestly, he's kind of solid quietly. He's one of the better intermediate passers in the country. And, does that regress without Bowers? Probably a little bit. If you look at it, his average depth of target dropped from 10.8 to 10.4 to 7.2 against Vanderbilt. I'm not sure if that's a product of the matchup or not yet. It's a 1-game sample size. I really do need to see more. Graham Mertz on the other side. Brought him up earlier. This is the Graham Mertz show. He hasn't been bad, man. He's been really risk-averse, but not bad. And that's something I was banging the table saying, this is a terrible... No, he's been pretty good. He's coming off his best game of the season by far, 423 yards, 3 touchdowns, 11.2 ADOT. That's all season highs. Of course, Georgia's defense is not South Carolina's defense, though.
Totally agree. And you said it, Brett. The world's largest outdoor cocktail party. I don't care if they've gotten away from it or not. They've also gotten away from the Red River Shootout. Doesn't mean that I change the way I think about and talk about these games. One of only 3 regular season games that I support taking place at a neutral site, Brett. It is along with the Red River Shootout. And, of course, Army-Navy. I've actually talked about how I think this game, personally, I think this game would be better in Athens and in Gainesville. But I know these fan bases are very adamant that it remain neutral sites. So who am I as, an outsider to either of these teams, an outsider to the SEC, to come in and try to change a tradition that they really love? If I'm going to stand over here on my high horse and talk about how I love traditions, well, Kelly, if you love traditions, leave this one alone. And so I'm good with this one being neutral site. I do think it's a really fun game. I think it could be exciting on campus, but we'll leave it where it is. This game has a watchability score of 7.8. Given the rivalry nature of this, I'd personally... probably like to see it with a higher score. The main reason that it's being downgraded, though, is because the projected competitiveness component. Again, I'm looking at average quality, projected quality, and projected competitiveness. 2 pretty quality teams, I'd say. Georgia, of course, higher in the power ratings. And I've been high on Florida all year relative to I think what most would think. But with a spread of minus 14.5, that's what my numbers make it. The competitiveness component gets dinged a little bit. 84% win expectancy for the Dogs. At number 10, this is the lowest I've had Georgia power rated since 2016. That was Kirby's
Wow.
first year in Athens. Dogs have been downgraded 7.2 points since the preseason. That's 5th most nationally. But Brett, I've said this over and over on this show and on other places throughout this year. Georgia doesn't have to be better than the 2021 and 2022 versions of itself. It only has to be better than the teams on its schedule in 2023. And that's exactly how my model views the Dogs. It makes them a favorite of at least a field goal in every remaining regular season game. Now, those future projected spreads have come down as the season's gone along. As I mentioned, I've downgraded Georgia throughout the year, but they're still a favorite of a field goal or more in every remaining game.
You know what, though? This is exactly where Kirby Smart wants to be.
Oh, yeah. Oh, totally.
This is exactly where Georgia wants to be. The fact that they're being disrespected at number 10 and... I have a bad feeling about this. I really do. We talked about this being 2007 all over again, and we're maybe going to end up with the same 4 teams at the end of the day.
Well, you want to talk about him being able to play a disrespect card. Georgia should not. I guess I won't go as far as to say it won't be, but Georgia absolutely should not be number 1 in the committee's rankings on Halloween night, which, again, as we know, those are the ones that matter. You can agree with them, you can disagree with them, you can wave your fist at the clouds. That's what it is. And I'm going to argue about them too, because that's what I do. But they won't be number 1 in those. I don't believe. They shouldn't be. And that's where Kirby's going to be like, guys, look, we've only lost 1 game since November 2020. And here they are putting us at number 3, probably. I mean, maybe 2, as low as 4. Anyway, Kirby's going to have his motivation. I appreciate you considering that he's thinking about my numbers or seeing my numbers. He's certainly not seeing them power rated number 10 or most deserving number 8, but he will see the CFP numbers. You can't not, and he will use that for sure. And Georgia is a really good football team. They're going to be just fine. Like I said, their favorite each game the rest of the way. Both teams coming out of their off week, as they always do leading into this one. It's like LSU, Alabama. I do like how it's the SEC. It's other conferences too. I mean, when you're smart about scheduling, and you've got your biggest teams playing their biggest rivalry games, if you will, you schedule in such a way that both teams have equal rest. Either they're both coming off a bye, which the SEC does a really good job of, or neither are coming off a bye. You can't always do it, I understand, but I do really like how these two teams typically, we'll see how it shakes out in the new SEC 16 teams starting next year. I like how both these teams come out of their off week to play each other here. So no rest advantage is a short way of saying it. Georgia should have the edge on both sides of the ball, though. They have the number 7 offense, the number 9 defense by my numbers. Based on my current numbers, this is the best opposing defense that Florida will face all season. Not surprising. The Georgia defense is always really good. Gators, number 33 overall, number 56 on defense. They're a season best, number 23 on offense. You talked about it, Brett, that Graham Mertz-led offense. They're playing well, and he's not making mistakes that have plagued him in the past. So if he can avoid those turnover-worthy plays, as you talked about earlier, who knows? This game could absolutely, with no Brock Bowers and an extra week to scheme it up for Florida. I know Georgia had it too. It could be closer than what we're expecting. As things stand, Georgia currently has an 80% chance to win the East, a 43% chance to make the CFP. With a win, those chances improve to 85% and 49% respectively. A loss only drops Georgia to a 60% chance to make it to Atlanta, but the Dogs would have just a 13% chance to make the CFP. Again, there's not a lot of meat on the schedule for them to get back up there. Now, if they're a 1-loss SEC champion, 2-time defending national champions, the committee won't leave them out, whether their resume deserves it or not. My numbers aren't looking at what the committee's going to say. My numbers are looking strictly at the numbers, which is why I have the 13% chance with a loss. A win for Florida sees their chances to win the East improve from 1% to 16%. So it's still a long shot, but they stay on the fringes of that race if they can pull off this shock win. Bottom line, Georgia minus 14.5, 16% chance that Florida stays in that SEC East race.
I've seen it before. This isn't metrics. This isn't matchups. This isn't any of that. But this feels like a game where Georgia just kind of puts their foot down. They did it against Kentucky. Everyone's like, I don't know, Kentucky. And they're like, no. This kind of feels like that kind of thing brewing. I know Florida's probably a little bit better, but
I think so.
they?
A little bit.